creepy throwbacks of Ashton Kutcher that are now resurfacing. Trapmore gang, we've got a new name in the Epstein files, a new celebrity, and who is it? Dun da da da. The latest name to be implicated in the Epstein files is our guy Ashton Kutcher, man from That 70s Show and Punk'd. New disturbing allegations have resurfaced after his name has appeared in the Epstein files, okay? Now, interestingly enough, okay, there's some creepy throwbacks of Ashton Kutcher that are now resurfacing. He did a 2002 interview alongside his co-star and current wife, Mila Kunis, that has raised a few eyebrows. This was posted in Reddit's r/That's Insane. And it's basically Ashton Kutcher casually telling a story about how convicted violent R-Word and co-star Danny Masterson tried to solicit him to assault a then 14-year-old Mila Kunis during the filming of That 70s Show. Excuse me? What? Let's hear it.
When she was 14 when we started the show. I was like 19, right?
Right.
And they're like, okay, you guys are going to be making out in this scene. And I'm like thinking like, wait, this is like slightly illegal, right?
I was going to say, that's probably your first kiss ever, right?
It was my first kiss. Why don't someone bet you made with Danny about our first kiss?
No, it wasn't the first kiss.
No,
This was like a second or third kiss.
It was the first. It was like the first week.
No, it was not the first week.
Whatever. Let me tell you what happened.
No, let me tell you what happened.
No. Okay, so I've never kissed a guy. So I was so. I mean, you know, Ash was attractive, and I was a 14-year-old little girl, and I was extremely scared for my life.
Sure.
And he was very nice about it. He was like, "Oh, don't worry." So I was like, "Okay." Then Danny goes to him and goes, "Dude, I'll give you $10 if you French kiss her." What would you stick your tongue in my mouth or some?
What? No.
For $10.
You're making it sound like it was like really. Okay, Dan, we had a little side bet going.
Yeah.
Like,
Which was?
It wasn't very
as to whether or not, you're kissing on the show or boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah.
You would use tongue, right, Rosie? I mean, you would.
It depends what kind of an actor you are, I guess.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So Danny bets me like $20 that I wouldn't do it, and of course I'm like, yeah, sure, what's the deal? You know?
Then the cop showed up and you got arrested, pretty much.
They should have,
He
but they
never
didn't.
did it, and he claimed.
They should have. What?
He claims to this day he did it. I swear.
Mila,
never.
I so did it.
He never did it?
I didn't let him. I think he tried, but I think I kept my mouth so closed.
Yeah. You did the old teeth block?
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't let him
did the teeth block. You were like,
He never got his
You were
tongue
very
in his
excited.
mouth.
You didn't, Ashton. Just admit it.
Dad, I swear.
She's 14. She didn't. You stop it.
No, that was not the first. You had turned 15 by then.
No, she was 12, but I know it.
There's a big difference. That 1 year makes the whole world change.
All right, then. We're coming up with the guy who has a name that should have been chased for show business. Wilmer Vanderama. I don't even know how to say it. What's the point? Yeah, Danny will be here as well. Don't go away.
He said too much. Got his arms crossed. He said too much. That is a bit weird, okay? That is a bit weird. People saying the clip didn't age well. Age like milk. Yeah, I don't think this is going to blow as quietly as they hoped, all right? They gave him so many chances to say he didn't actually do it. He kept pushing, all right? Danny sounds like such a great guy, so kind and respectable. The letters were right, okay? It is super weird, all right? It's super weird. So there's all these different allegations about this guy. He had an R-word trial, okay? His name was tarnished. People actually wrote letters of support for him, okay? He was sentenced to serve 30 years to life in prison for R-wording 2 women between the years of 2001 and 2003, along with Kunis and Kutcher writing letters. They wrote personal letters. They said, not my boy. They both wrote letters of support for him. They said it was just a fun little bet. It was just a cool little bet. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis called out for their hypocrisy after their letters in the Danny Masterson case were revealed, all right? Following the sentencing, they sent in letters. They asked the judge for leniency in the case, and the letters were published in full. Oh, no, right? Oh, no. Danny's proven to be an amazing friend, confident, and an outstanding older brother to me. What about them bets? How about them bets? I don't know. Witnessing interactions with his daughter is heartwarming and enlightening. Oh, he demonstrates grace and empathy in every situation. Was it graceful and empathetic when he was making them side bets? I don't know. I don't know. It is weird. Ashton Kutcher co-founding a campaign to end child trafficking, but writing letters of support for a serial R-word bestie is such a great encapsulation of the way people love to fight against their imaginary idea of what abuse is, but not what it actually is. That's what people were saying. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, as of now, it's now been exposed. 2004 messages that were basically revealing that Ghislaine Maxwell directly contacted Ashton Kutcher's team to try and help a young girl get into acting. Now, do you believe that Ghislaine Maxwell was trying to get girls into acting. I think she was trying to get girls into one thing, and it was bad. So this is a message from Bonnie Hung. Because, hi, Ghislaine, they will be expecting blank and her father Monday at 7 p.m. The address is blank. They'll be shooting a scene in a restaurant called Daily Grill. The area is called Manhattan Beach, and it's part of an area called El Segundo. The driver should take the 405 to Rosecrans and go west. When they are close by, they should call blank Ashton's assistant so she can meet them in the parking yard trailer near the Daily Grill. Hi, Ghislaine. When you're close by, they should call Ashton's assistant. Okay. Her number is blank. Eli Holzman used to work for Miramax. What? Miramax as in Harvey Weinstein Miramax. And now works at Ashton's production company. We'll also be there to greet them. They'll be shown around the set, taken to meet Ashton. Have a bite to eat, perhaps. Please give them my cell number as well in case there's any problem. Blank. If they have a cell phone on them, I can give it to blank just in case. Let me know if you have any questions. Looking forward to seeing you September, Ghislaine. From Bonnie. From Bonnie Hung. Okay. Okay, all right then. Ashton. Another message. Okay, another message. All right, another set of messages. From Bonnie Hung to Ghislaine Maxwell. Just checking you're all set with the set visit and the directions I sent you are clear. Please have blank call Ashton's assistant on blank when they're close so she can tell them exactly where she is at the time. Ghislaine Maxwell, G-Max, replied, Bonnie, thanks, all is set. Ted, the dad, has all the no's. And we'll call Ashton's assistant. If someone can talk to blank about becoming an actress, that would be great. Replied, hi, yes. Eli Holzman will be speaking to her about acting. He's experienced in casting, has worked in the industry with actors for many years, just getting young girls into acting. I think Ghislaine Maxwell was just trying to have a little acting operation. I feel like that's probably what was going on, right? So look, there's been some disturbing links and controversies related to Ashton Kutcher that have spanned over the years, all right? And there's definitely been a lot of very sad and messed up things that happened in his life, and I do have sympathy for him. It is very, very messed up and dark, some of the things that he's been through. I'm not trying to just put him down completely, but at the same time, you know, clearly there was some hypocrisy on display when it came to the case that his friend caught, right? So in 2001, I want to talk about something very sad. In 2001, Kutcher's girlfriend was actually murdered, and he would end up kind of testifying against what was called the Hollywood Ripper, a Hollywood serial killer. It's super messed up, super sad, and just, you know, just bizarre that all these kind of things were going on in his life. So I do have the utmost sympathy for him going through this. I'm not going to try and say that there's anything nefarious going on with this, but clearly, okay, there are some strange links and some very interesting folklore when it comes to Ashton Kutcher.
This morning, all eyes on Ashton Kutcher, the Hollywood heartthrob, now turned star witness in the so-called Hollywood Ripper trial. Kutcher, appearing on the stand Wednesday sporting a mustache and dressed in a blue suit, describes the night 18 years ago when his friend and romantic interest, Ashley Ellerin, was stabbed 47 times. Kutcher says the two had plans to meet for a drink that evening, but when Ashley didn't answer his calls, he swung by the house and tells the jury, I knocked on the door, there was no answer. Knocked again, and once again, no answer. He adds, at this point, I pretty well assumed she had left for the night and that I was late and she was upset. Ashton testifies that when he went to Ellerin's house, all the lights were on, adding, it was a little bit of a mess. I saw what I thought was red wine spilled on the carpet, adding, I didn't really think anything of it. Police now believe that red wine was really blood. Prosecutors said the 22-year-old model and fashion student was likely already dead, killed allegedly by this man, Michael Gargiulo, a neighborhood air conditioner repairman who is now on trial for her murder along with a string of others. Prosecutors describe Gargiulo as a serial sexual thrill killer who got pleasure from killing beautiful women, butchering 3 of them, including Ellerin. His 4th allegedly survived. Prosecutors allege his murder spree started with killing 18-year-old Trisha Picaccio in Chicago in 1993, then Ellerin in Los Angeles in 2001, 32-year-old Maria Bruno murdered in California. Prosecutors say in April of 2008, 27-year-old Michelle Murphy was attacked by Gargiulo, also in California, but she survived.
His hobby was plotting the perfect opportunity to attack women with a knife in and around their homes.
The actor also admitted he was worried he would become a possible suspect. His fingerprints on the victim's door. Gargiulo's attorney, Daniel Nardoni, tells him, don't worry, you're not a suspect.
So look, this is obviously really sad and traumatic thing for him to go through, and I do feel like, in spite of some of the things that happened later, you know, that definitely is going to be something that messes with your head. Now, interestingly enough, years later, following the assault trial of his co-star Danny Masterson, some very interesting things would end up coming out publicly, okay? So this would kind of be basically a breakdown of, you know, some of the things that was going around, some information that came out from one of Masterson's victims, and basically that kind of changed the way some people were looking at Ashton Kutcher. Let's hear this and I'll tell you a bit more about it.
dead girlfriend. Ashton Kutcher was dating a girl named Ashley Elreen. In 2001, Ashley was murdered in her apartment. Her and Ashton were dating, and they had plans to go to a Grammys party that night. So he texted her around 8 p.m. and said that he would pick her up in about an hour or so. He gets to her house around 10 p.m., 2 hours later, and he knocks on the door. No one answers. Texts her, calls her, no answer. He looks in the window. He sees a big red stain on the rug in the living room, and he thinks, oh, she must have spilled wine. And I'm getting ghosted. She's not answering. He leaves and goes to the party. The next morning, her roommate comes home, finds her brutally murdered in the house. Ashton Kutcher hears what happens and calls the police saying, hey, I'm dating this girl. My fingerprints are going to be all over the house. This murder goes unsolved till years later. They eventually pinned it on a serial killer in the area, the Hollywood Ripper, because he lived next door to her. But the Hollywood Ripper's DNA was not at her apartment when it was at every other crime scene that he had.
Wow.
Then, years later, do you know that 70s show? There's a star, Danny Masterson. Have you heard of him? So he was convicted of sexual assault pretty recently, a few years ago. When that whole thing was happening, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis wrote letters to the judge saying how great of a person Danny was, how he would never do anything like that. Those letters got leaked to the press that they were trying to sway the judge. One of the victims wrote a post on social media that says, Dear Ashton, I know the secrets your role model keeps for you, ones that would end you.
Stop.
Did you forget I was there? You were on speakerphone the night you called Danny on February 21st, 2001, which was the night that Ashley was murdered. She said, I heard everything. I heard the plan. In my opinion, you're just as sick as your mentor. So people think that Ashton involved Danny, maybe blackmailed him to help him clean it up. And on the night of the murder, Ashton Kutcher only called 2 people, Danny Masterson and his publicist. And then it goes into Ashton Kutcher and his dead girlfriend. Ashton Kutcher was dating a girl named Ashley Elreen. In 2001, Ashley was murdered in her apartment. Her and Ashton were dating, and they had plans to go to a Grammys party that night. So he texted her around 8 p.m. and said that he would pick her up in about an hour or so. He gets to her house around 10 p.m., 2 hours later, and he knocks on the door. No one answers. Texts her, calls her, no answer. He looks in the window. He sees a big red stain on the rug in the living room, and he thinks, oh, she must have spilled wine. And I'm getting ghosted. She's not answering. He leaves and goes to the party. The next morning, her roommate comes home, finds her brutally murdered in the house. Ashton Kutcher hears what happens and calls the police saying, hey, I'm dating this girl. My fingerprints are going to be all over the house.
It's pretty strange, right? Now, look, I don't want to just take that at complete face value, but it is definitely interesting and intriguing. Now, a lot of strange things would go on with Ashton Kutcher in the years that followed, okay? In 2009, him and his then wife, Demi Moore, would found Thorn, which ironically was an anti-child trafficking organization that unfortunately had some ties to highly questionable figures, and this was something that was covered by the YouTuber Coffee and Cults in this video that I'll show you.
Especially when it comes to the company that has spent almost 2 decades laundering Ashton Kutcher's reputation, the charity Thorn. Thorn allegedly helps exploited children, according to Ashton Kutcher anyway. But there is so much more to Thorn than most people realize, including ties to Harvey Weinstein and Diddy. And on top of that, Thorn also made an investment into Ashton Kutcher's venture capital fund that's also co-owned by a billionaire who was on the Jeffrey Epstein list.
Yikes. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting and strange discrepancies going on behind the scenes. Now, investigators would discover discrepancies in Thorn's actual intentions and the number of victims that they were claiming to help. And, you know, some people, in their opinion, they basically feel like, you know, it wasn't what it was supposed to be, let's say, kindly.
Over WhatsApp. So just to be clear and break it down, what's being said here is that every bit of data, be it Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, any messaging, especially on apps, would be all readable by government institutions, with the only people being exempt from this, government officials. There also has been a lot of criticism around Thorn's numbers that they purport and how effective this spotlight tool is. There are several small journalists, never the mainstream media, that have spoken out about Thorn's numbers not being what they or Ashton Kutcher have purported them to be, especially in regards to Ashton Kutcher's speeches at Congress or in Europe. And we will get back to him contradicting himself in these speeches, as I have managed managed to get hold of a paper that Thorne didn't want released, but in regards to the number of victims that they've helped or claim that they've helped, these journalists have gone and dug up the numbers from the FBI, and what they've concluded is that Thorne is claiming to have helped in more trafficking investigations and helping more victims than there are actual cases opened across the entire US. The Follow the Money article that I just read from
So they're basically saying, look, the amount of help that you guys are saying you do is more than the amount of cases that are actually going on. That's what is being alleged in these people's opinion. I can't confirm or deny that in absolute terms in this video, in this particular moment. But Kutcher would basically, you know, be caught out in a few different, you know, slightly embarrassing moments. Obviously, we're talking about these connections to Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, you know, young actresses being brought into his orbit and being put into contact with his assistants, brought to set. Interestingly enough, there would also be the Diddy connection. So during an episode of Hot Ones, Ashton Kutcher would give a notably cryptic response when he was asked to share stories from Diddy's infamous parties, which caused a few people to raise their eyebrows. Okay, check this one out.
Diddy party stories, they're our favorite genre of anecdote, if you have one, yeah.
Wow, okay, I've got a lot I can't tell. So, I can't tell that one either. I mean, I'm like actually cycling through them.
Well, we still have some time to go, you know, I can blow it here.
Okay. Feel free. Diddy party stories, man. That was like some weird memory lane. Ugh.
He looks traumatized. He's, Diddy pass, some weird mirror. He looks traumatized. They're saying two of his friends are R-words, just saying. Right, Diddy facing charges for human trafficking, including minors. Didn't Ashton have some charity or advocacy group to save kids from that? He did, and many people have questioned its legitimacy and actual effects and actions, considering the company he keeps, Danny Masterson Diddy, and he's been dragged online over it multiple times. I think he vacated his position in the charity during the pandemic years. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy person, but like Ashton Kutcher has a lot of weird stuff around him. The murder of one of his dates that he just left, even though he thought her blood was spilled wine, Diddy Masterson, and he has a child trafficking charity and was known for trying to help kids. Like, what is going on here? People saying, wait, what about the murder of his date? Yeah. Yeah. Crazy shit. Crazy shit. Okay. It's actually wild. So jumping forward to 2023, all right, that's when we get to the Danny Masterson sentencing. He got 30 years in prison for the assault of two women. I'm just going to remind you, okay, of the fate that his long-term friend and someone he defended ended up in.
A jury found Masterson guilty back in May for two attacks that happened 20 years ago at his home in L.A. The judge handed down the maximum jail time allowed under the law. Magda Gabrisalasa is in Washington. This is a story getting a lot of attention, not just because of just how long it's taken to get to sentencing and for this case to make its way through the courts, Magda, but tell us more.
Yeah, well, before a sentence was handed down yesterday, the court heard from the victims, and they talked about the trauma that they endured and the way they continue to suffer. Now, Masterson reportedly did not react in the courtroom during this.
So in addition to the victim testimony that was sounds like it was very moving, prior to his sentencing actually taking place and him getting 30 years, getting slapped with a big sentence, apparently over 50 character reference letters were submitted to the judge, including letters by Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. Clearly, the judge wasn't moved by these because he slapped him with 30 years, but let's just hear a little bit more about how that went down.
In her letter, which was made public today by the court, Mila Kunis describes Masterson, a convicted rapist, as having a caring nature and says he is an outstanding role model. Danny has proven to be an amazing friend, confidant, and above all, an outstanding older brother figure to me. Ashton Kutcher calls him kind, courteous, and hardworking. He has always treated people with decency, equality, and generosity. The letters did not sway the judge. She sentenced Masterson to the max, 30 years to life, telling him, your actions were criminal. You will have to come to terms with their consequences.
That's you know what I'm saying? Those are the breaks. Now, jumping forward to October of 2024, that's when, following Diddy's arrest, apparently insiders were reporting that Ashton Kutcher was actually terrified that he himself would be implicated in the S trafficking investigation. This is a Daily Mail article. I'm not making this up. I'm just reading you a public article that's been out for more than a year. This is Ashton Kutcher terrified Diddy could make up false allegations about his celebrity friends to clear his name in the S trafficking trial. So apparently Ashton Kutcher, he's regretting his friendship with Diddy, and he fears the disgraced music mogul would willingly lie to authorities about his famous friends if it meant he could clear his name. Diddy was waiting trial in the MDC in New York for S trafficking, racketeering, transportation to engage in S work. Kutcher, 46, had been close friends with Combs for 2 decades. He'd attended the parties, with the duo speaking highly of each other over the years, and the actor attended one of his infamous white parties. However, in light of Combs' arrest, insiders were claiming Kutcher is terrified that the rap star could say anything, do anything, or turn on anyone to get out of jail. Ashton absolutely regrets his friendship with Diddy, considering what's happened. He feels lied to, betrayed, and taken for granted and manipulated. All right, they be big chilling. He touching, he feeling on his nipples. You know what be going on with his nipples, man. You know what be going on with Diddy. Hey. The source continued, he feels the same way about Danny Masterson. He now trusts no one except for his wife Mila Kunis, and he's going to keep his circle to his family. Well, we heard what they were saying about Danny Masterson, but hey, that's just people's opinion. Back in October 2023, Kutcher and Kunis, 40, came under fire after sharing letters of support with Danny Masterson. Oh my god, I'm tired of all this gross stuff. Following the backlash, the couple who got married in 2015 shared 2 children. He posted an apology video online, and he stepped down as the chair of his anti-child abuse organization, right? That's crazy to actually have stepped down in that incident. Having weathered the backlash, he's now preparing for the possibility of being dragged into the investigation with Combs. Ashton does have fears about how this investigation will play out. He feels Diddy would have no problem lying to the authorities and tossing out some of his famous friends' name if it meant he could get him out of jail. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like if you were really that worried, I feel like you don't get that worried unless you're worried about something real. If it's like, look, this guy's going to just make up bullshit, there's no proof, nothing proving it, would you really care? Like, Diddy can make up shit about me. I'm not really worried, but I ain't been to the parties. I ain't doing an episode of Hot Ones having a 1,000-mile stare when I'm asked about the Diddy party and not able to answer the question. But anyway, it says everyone who's close to Diddy fears the possibility of Diddy making up false allegations to clear his own name, right? Swinging in there like a wrecking ball. Daily Mail reported previously Kutcher was expecting a subpoena when Combs' house was raided earlier this year. He does not want to get involved in this, but he knows his association means he already is. The insider explained, if he gets contacted by the authorities, he'll be fully cooperative as he has nothing to hide. He is just in fear. He knows he's dug himself a hole with this one, but never in a million years did he believe Diddy was truly doing these horrible things. Insisting that Kutcher never attended one of the freak-off sessions, the insider claimed the final straw in their friendship was the video of Combs dragging Cassie Ventura across the hotel lobby. That was harsh. That was horrible. They had a genuine friendship, but when Ashton and Mila saw the video of Cassie, they realized he was a monster and not someone they want in their life. Now, that is the right thing to say. That is the right thing to say. So we can ease up on Ashton Kutcher a little bit. He basically revealed, Diddy revealed on James Corden that the show Punk'd that Ashton fronted actually brought them together. He said, I gave Ashton a call one day. I heard you're going to punk me, and I just don't think that's a good idea. If you do that, it will not end well for you, but I think we should work out a deal. Combs explained he was fearful of being targeted on Punk'd after watching an episode of Kanye West, adding it got so dangerous. Imagine punking Diddy at the Diddy party. Imagine he punked him for real. Diddy punked himself, really. But that is actually crazy. Obviously, we already saw the Hot Ones thing, says how they used to hang out. He played a part in getting Diddy to sign up to the New York City Marathon in 2003 after they went running together. Halfway through the run, Diddy's like, I'm running out of gas right now. There's paparazzi all around us. He's like, you got to slow down and make it look like you're not slowing down because you don't want to look like I'm not going to be able to finish this thing. And he was losing it. He said, we finish out the run. He was so upset over the fact that he got skunked on this run. He decided he would run the New York Marathon. He just immediately started training for the New York Marathon. He just can't lose. Even when he's that close to humility, he becomes a driver. Then he went out and he ran the New York Marathon, right? Apparently he supported him at public events. He's lighting his gars. He's lighting his... You know what I'm saying? That's how you get down. Okay, Ashton Kutcher attended Combs' Unforgivable Women Fragrance launch. That's a crazy name. Unforgivable for sure. He was among A-listers invited to the mogul's infamous White Party in LA in 2009, where he posed for a picture alongside Combs and wife Demi Moore. Diddy's facing life in prison. Now, as we know, it didn't end up getting as serious for Diddy as we'd thought or hoped.
The great
he only ended up getting a few years for the worker charges. But basically, there's been a lot going on with Ashton Kutcher. Right, the last thing that I want to show you, actually, a couple more things. Okay, so this Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis were slammed for posting a groveling, lawyered-up apology for sending character letters on behalf of Danny Masterson. So let's hear what they said in their allegedly groveling apology.
We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
A couple months ago, Danny's family reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years, so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling.
They were intended for the judge to read, and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or rape.
So look, they're doing the best they can to clean it up, right? But arguably they shouldn't have done that. And they were apologizing because they got caught up, because the information became public. As I said, the letters were just meant for the judge. You weren't supposed to see those. You weren't supposed to know that we were supporting him after his conviction. And the judge didn't care, gave him 30 years. So I think that says a lot about what was happening. Now, this is the last thing I want to leave you on. Basically, Ashton Kutcher, Danny Masterson and Diddy's relationship just has been under a lot of scrutiny. These disturbing connections have not been something that Ashton Kutcher has been able to escape, unfortunately. And so this is an article, Secrets of Hollywood's New Rat Pack, Ashton Kutcher, Diddy, and allegations of disturbing connections. Okay, it basically says the Hollywood New Rat Pack, Ashton Kutcher, Diddy Combs, Danny Masterson, and Wilmer Vanderrama faces intense public scrutiny as recent revelations question the group's deep ties and their association with disturbing allegations. Okay, decades-old allegations against Diddy date all the way back to the 90s. Claims of abuse, harassment, manipulation, the crimes against Cassie. Meanwhile, Ashton Kutcher's association with Danny Masterson, his unwavering support for him has sparked a lot of backlash. The letters were very embarrassing. And basically, there's also questions about Wilmer Vanderrama's relationships with younger underage partners during the 2000s. And basically, people are saying that this little group of people, the new Rat Pack, who are basically getting into a bunch of trouble and getting dragged into each other's scandals together, okay? All of this was going on throughout the 2000s, high-profile parties amongst these groups, private venues. People were wondering what was going on behind closed doors. And basically, all of this scrutiny is arguably kind of tearing down these little hidden Hollywood networks that have been such safe havens for some of these creepy men for so long. Now, look, I definitely have enjoyed some of Ashton Kutcher's work over the years. I think it is disturbing to see his name being brought up in the Epstein files. For the record, it wasn't a message from him directly. He wasn't soliciting anything from Ghislaine Maxwell from what we can see. But at the same time, she was in the network. She was communicating with his assistant. There was a young woman going to set on her behalf, trying to get her into Hollywood. And it just makes you wonder, when you hear these stories of Ghislaine Maxwell, you know, telling women that they're going to have these careers in massage and modeling and media, and then she's lining them up to be abused by Jeffrey Epstein. Did Ashton Kutcher accidentally, inadvertently get sucked into a situation where, you know, the reward for tolerating abuse was potentially a career, potentially getting around Ashton Kutcher, his team, his assistant, being on set? It's really sad and it's really dark that is what it's come to. Now, I do wonder if Ashton Kutcher will say anything about this. I feel like it's probably not serious enough and not enough media have picked up on it to elicit a response. You know, he was quick to apologize when he was getting exposed for the Danny Masterson letters, but he might be over. He might just be done. He might be ready to just not even address this one. But I do think it's interesting. I do think that Hollywood has been exposed, and there's going to be some more falls. I think Harvey Weinstein's fall was delightful and definitely enjoyed by a lot of people as far as just seeing how far he fell from grace. But I think that there is a lot more to be done as far as cleaning up Hollywood and some of the nefarious stuff that's been going on behind the scenes. These parties, these relationships, these abuse systems being dismantled. And it was ironic that Ashton Kutcher had like an anti-trafficking organization. I've not seen anything to see that he is complicit in trafficking directly, but unfortunately, when we're seeing emails with Ghislaine Maxwell and your people in your circle and they're tapping you in with the assistant, it's a bad look. So, you know, no disrespect. Ashton Kutcher's definitely an amazing actor. He's been through a lot, and I don't personally believe I don't personally believe that he is responsible for that murder. I think that was a real bad tragedy, and he did his best to help deliver justice in that case. But let me know what you guys think, man. Is this another Hollywood scalp that's been claimed by the Epstein files, or is this just another reach? You know, a lot of names have been dragged in there. Jay-Z, Rihanna. I don't think a lot of those mentions have merit, but objectively, your name is now in the Epstein files. It's done. You're in there. You're in the files. For better or for worse, you're in the files. Okay, maybe that was by intention. Maybe other big names are getting dragged into this to deflect from other names. Who knows? Okay, I will catch you guys in the next video. Let me know what you thought of that breakdown. And for now, I'm out here, guys. Peace.
Maybe don't get on the jet, bro. When Michael Jackson was taking people to...
Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing new information on Jeffrey Epstein's last night in prison. Before we get started with this, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. What we're going to be analyzing today is new information that I have found from Jeffrey Epstein's last night in prison. I'm sure most everybody has seen the orange figure that walks up to his cell. I'm going to show you that again if you haven't seen it. That'll be very brief. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of what happened that night and what we know about that night, and then I'm going to show you the new information that I found. We have a variety of other things we're going to be analyzing from that night as well. All right, let's just jump right in. So as I referenced before, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you an orange figure that goes up to Jeffrey Epstein's tier. He was on a place called L tier. That's the cell block he was on. I'm going to show you this figure walk up these stairs right over here. I'm going to show you this figure walking up to that cell block. The reason I'm showing you this again is so I can explain what I've found that tells us what this is and what it is not. You can see it right there. There's somebody wearing orange that just walked up those stairs to Jeffrey Epstein's cell. Let's watch that one more time. I know we've talked about this before, but this is really, really important. So you see that right there. Now, a little bit of background before we move on and get into the more important things. For anybody that is not that familiar with this night, there were two correctional officers that were on duty that night, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas. And they were supposed to do counts every 30 minutes. They weren't doing them. The final count they did was at around 10 o'clock. Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell at 6:33 the next morning. This right here is at 10:39. Every single bit of documentation says nobody went up to the cell at 10:39. There's nothing that suggests anything to the fact that anybody else went up there after their 10 o'clock count. What I'm going to show you now is the final report that was made on the investigation of this incident. I'm going to show you what it officially says, and I'm going to show you how we know for a fact that is not true. So I'm going to show you that next. Then we're going to keep going. Hundreds of hours of interviews. There's stacks and stacks and stacks of papers that they analyzed, that they reviewed. And this is what they came up with to explain that orange figure. They said, through review and analysis of the SHU footage, the SHU being the Special Housing Unit, that's the name of that area of the prison. So through review and analysis of the SHU footage, witness statements, and BOP records, the OIG determined that at approximately 10:40 p.m., a CO, believed to be Noel, carried linen or inmate clothing up to L tier, which was the last time any CO approached the only entrance to the SHU tier in which Epstein was housed. Now, one thing that we know for sure is that witness statements do not corroborate this. Video footage does not corroborate this. BOP records also, nothing corroborates this. And I'm going to show you how not only does it not corroborate it, it actually proves it entirely wrong. So before I show you some information from a transcript that is the new information that I found that proves what was just said wrong, I do want you to actually get a chance to see this staircase, because what they're suggesting is that one of the correctional officers carried a whole bunch of linens up these stairs, and we never saw them come down. I want you to actually see how wide this staircase is. So this is the staircase that leads up to where Jeffrey Epstein is housed. As you can see, it is very narrow. This is not wide at all. So if you're going to come back down these stairs, you are going to be visible. People will be able to see you coming back down unless you are trying to not be seen. Now, if you hugged the edge and really tried to sneak out, you could avoid being spotted by the cameras. And if the correctional officer, which we've seen go up and down the stairs, even though it's not a very big spot, we've seen them go up and down the stairs in other parts, they're very visible. Unless you are really trying to avoid being seen, you're 100% going to be spotted walking back down these stairs. Now, I know I've covered some of this before, but I really need you to understand all of that before we go on to the transcript so I can show you exactly why we know for a 100% fact that this was not, in fact, Correctional Officer Tova Noel carrying linens up or anybody else, because there were only two correctional officers there that night. This is what Jeffrey Epstein's cell looked like the morning he was found. sheets everywhere, extra clothes everywhere. It's just disgusting. But there's an abundance of extra linens. Part of the investigation into the death of Jeffrey Epstein was doing a thorough, and I'm talking 400-plus page interviews of both Tova Noel and Michael Thomas. They're separate interviews. But what I'm going to show you right now is an interview by the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice with Tova Noel. And I want you to see what she says about carrying linens. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to go on. So after having looked at that picture, that gives you some context for what they're talking about right here, because basically they wanted to find out more about why Epstein had so many linens inside of his cell, because it was just so many. So the DOJ, and it says Mr. Blank, I'm just going to say DOJ because it's the Department of Justice. So DOJ asks, okay, why did Epstein have extra clothing and extra linens in his cell? Ms. Noel said, I don't know. On August 10th, I don't know. You don't know? But you said that was something that you did, though, as far as your duties, to be able to provide people with linens and clothes. Ms. Noel said, I never gave out linen, ever, because that's done on the shift prior. DOJ asks, what shift is that? Ms. Noel says, 8 to 4. And did you ever work the 8 to 4 shift? Yes, but I worked the 8 to 4 when I come in to do overtime before, but it's not always in shoe. DOJ says, okay, so have you ever worked 8 to 4 in the shoe? Ms. Noel says, I think I have. The DOJ asks, and do you remember doing the linens? Ms. Noel says, I never gave linen. The DOJ states, you never gave linens. Ms. Noel says, never. What about the clothing? Nope, never. When is that done? I give toilet paper. Say that again. When is the clothing done? I don't know. So right here, this seems pretty definitive that despite the fact that the OIG report says that orange figure was in fact Miss Noel carrying linens, it seems abundantly clear based on what she said, not only was that not her, it wasn't anybody else on that shift, and she's never done that, ever. Now let's see what the other correctional officer on duty had to say. This is an interview with Mr. Thomas, the second correctional officer. Did you provide Epstein with any additional clothing or linens? No. Ever? No. No. Is that anything that would typically happen between the hours that you work? No. 12 to 8 a.m.? No. Okay. Is providing inmates with extra clothing and linens a security risk? I don't know. I don't know if it's a security risk or anything like that because I know when I don't know. Okay. I don't know. And then I'm going to skip down for the sake of time. The DOJ even states, again, you didn't provide the linens. So it's abundantly clear, based on what was said by Miss Correctional Officer Noel and Correctional Officer Thomas, neither of them provided linens. Nobody does it on that shift. So why is it that the Office of the Inspector General came to the determination through all information that they had that that's exactly what we are seeing? So I can say with absolute certainty, now that we have this, there is no possibility that that was a video of somebody carrying linens up to L tier. That was somebody wearing a jumpsuit. Not that that's a shock to anyone. I think we knew that before, but now with these interviews, we have absolute, complete confirmation that that is exactly what that was. I know as well as anybody that with everything going on in the news right now, it feels chaotic. It feels overwhelming. And the worst thing we could do right now is to narrow our informational diet, because that's when blind spots appear and those can be dangerous for our information. And that's why I want to show you Ground News, the sponsor of today's video. It's a news comparison platform and it aggregates over 50,000 different news sources. It shows you bias, factuality, and ownership of each source. Instead of giving you what you want to hear, it's going to show you the whole picture for every story being covered. So let me show you how this works. So here we've got a story. Ghislaine Maxwell appeals for clemency from Trump as she declines to answer questions from lawmakers. That was covered by over 300 news sources. If you're reading only right-wing news sources like News 9, you're going to see headlines like these. Ghislaine Maxwell pleads, invokes Fifth, offers to give Trump Clinton assurance. While left-leaning sources like CNN are saying, Maxwell can clear Trump's name in Epstein probe in exchange for clemency, attorney says. Exact same story, but covered entirely differently based on their leaning. Reading all these different headlines from all these different sources will give you a clearer picture of what's going on and allow you to stay informed. Ground News does not tell you what to think. It just shows you the landscape. It helps you understand the complete picture and how all sides are covering a story. If you want to see the full picture like me and see how news is being covered across the political spectrum, go to ground.news/Dr. G and get 40% off the Vantage plan. The link is in the description. There's a pinned comment and the QR code is right here. That's ground.news/Dr. G because you can't navigate what's happening if you can't see the full picture. All right, let's get back to the analysis. Now we're going to look at some additional information provided during Tova Noel's interview. So right here, They were asking whether or not she had received training on all of this when she was working for the special housing unit. She said, yeah, I didn't. You did not receive that training? No. Did you receive... So there's slides in the back that shows training and how they conducted it. Did they provide you with those slides? No, because I wasn't there. You weren't there? I was out on an injury. Okay, when were you out on an injury? What are the dates?
Okay, I got the buyer.
From March 2019 to... I came back in June. So when I came back in June, that's when I was told to sign this. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then the interview gets interrupted. We're going to go down to where it continues because it does get a little bit more interesting. So now the DOJ is stating, okay, so you were telling us, you said March through June you were injured. Ms. Noel says yes. The DOJ asks, you were not actually working during this time? And she says no. Do you remember around when in March and when did it end? What was the beginning of March, end of March, middle? I'm not sure. I just know it was March. Sometime in March? Yes. But when you came back, it was around the 26th when they asked you to sign those. I came back in June. I don't recall the date exactly. Okay. But I remember the day I came back into work, and the lieutenant asked me to go see this person. And she asked me to sign it. And I said I wasn't here. I was out on an injury. And she said she was aware, but they need me to sign for the program review. Okay, so I signed. All right, so this is basically them trying to figure out whether or not she got appropriate training. Now, the interesting part is the fact that she was out from March into June. It's interesting because of something that was mentioned on one of the FBI's documents. We're going to scroll down to that. What you're looking at now is a person of interest worksheet by the FBI of Miss Tova Noel. Now, the interesting part is when we scroll down to the second page, it says, returned from most recent trip on the 28th of April, 2019 on a flight from Beijing to JFK. So April 28th, 2019, that's between March and June. So at some point, based on what I'm reading here, it sounds like she went to China at some point in April while she was injured. So people are allowed to travel. They can go wherever it is that they want. Now, going to Beijing's pretty expensive, so it's a surprise, I suppose, because most people don't take trips, particularly when they're injured from a job like this, to a place like China. But what surprises me is they didn't ask questions about it. Nowhere that I could find, at least, did they state or ask any questions about why she went to China during her time off when she was injured. That seems like an unusual thing to do. Maybe it's the prison paid for. Maybe that's why they didn't ask. Maybe it has something to do with her on-the-job training. It would be an odd place to go, but there's zero information on this, and it seems like something that's worth highlighting because it seems like the kind of thing that the FBI would have had some questions about. Here's another inconsistency that seems peculiar, is that the way that Epstein's body is described by Tova Noel is very different than how it's described by Michael Thomas. So the DOJ is talking to her about what Epstein's body was like when it was found. They asked, and when you say no, are you saying nothing was around his neck? Ms. Noel says no, there was nothing around his neck. So there was nothing around his neck, okay, but what did he look like? Ms. Noel said blue. He looked blue. He looked like bloated or puffy or anything? No. Did he look like he was deceased? His face looked blue, but any reason for you to believe he was alive? No. Now, one thing that I noticed is that she said his face looked blue, but, and then they cut her off. I would love to know what the but is. What is it that she was going to say before they asked her another question? Now, we're going to contrast this with how Michael Thomas, the person who actually found Epstein's body, described it. Now the DOJ is asking Michael Thomas what Jeffrey Epstein looked like when he was found. So the DOJ asked, was he like completely purple? Mr. Thomas said, no, he was, no, absolutely not. He wasn't completely, and then it scrolls down. It wasn't like he was red or blue or his lips were like a different color. He wasn't any of that stuff. He was just, and the DOJ says, it looked like it happened just recently, or like, Mr. Thomas says, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I couldn't. Sure. Tell if you're a doctor. He didn't look different. I mean, it wasn't no discoloration or anything like that, if that's what you're trying to get. And it like he just
You
did
there?
it. And
Right.
it's, and
This
basically
guy,
saying it's
he's
like it
around
just
here
happened.
somewhere.
All
2
right,
seconds.
so he didn't look that
Yeah,
much different
okay,
than when he
yeah.
looked when he
He's
was
in a
alive.
yellow,
Yeah,
maybe an
didn't
orange
look. And then when we
camacho.
scroll a little further
Start
down,
looking,
the
I'll see if I can
DOJ
get an
said,
exact
did it seem like he
location on
was
this
dead at the time? Mr. Thomas replied, no, he didn't. DOJ asks, he actually seemed like he was alive? Well, he didn't. I don't really want to say dead or alive, but I was just doing chest compressions. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so anything like that, but I just know I just kept going. I don't know if he was dead or anything at the time. So point being is that Michael Thomas and Tova Noel have completely different descriptions of what his body looked like. And this is true of a lot of other people that have also observed it. Some people said he had something around his neck. Some people say he didn't. Some people say they could see injuries. Some people didn't. Nobody seems to be able to describe this the same way. Now, before we go into the next part, which is Michael Thomas talking about how Jeffrey Epstein's body was found in the cell, I want to talk for a second about a diagram that I created previously. So this is where Jeffrey Epstein's body was found. It was hanging from this ligature right here. There was a noose on the end. He said that the rope was longer. So this is not a shorter version of what was seen. He described it as longer. I just want you to keep that in mind, because if that is true, he would have been sitting on the floor. He would not have been elevated, which all of a sudden makes everything said by the medical examiner invalid, because the medical examiners was all about him being suspended off the ground. Anyway, so I just want you to get a chance to see this again, because I want you to remember what a small amount of space there is here, because I want you to hear the way that Michael Thomas describes the way the body was found. The way that he's talking about it, if you see this ligature right here, you see this piece of fabric, the body would have been up against this right here, would have been up against this metal pole right here. This is part of the bed frame, so it would have been directly up against that. But let's go up to read what he had to say about it, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what the medical examiner had to say. I'm just going to highlight some parts that stand out. So as they're talking about Michael Thomas having to rip the noose off, he said, he was asked, did you have to rip it off or slide it over his head? He said, no, not. What are you talking about with this still intact? Yeah, I took it off his head. I guess I took it off his head. I don't remember I did, but I guess I took it off him. But it's like I said, when I ripped it, it was tied to the other portion of it. So the noose itself was tied to that piece of fabric you just saw. And then he goes on to say, yeah, I ripped it from the piece that's still dangling. So he's looking at the picture that I just showed you. And then a little bit further down, the DOJ says, okay, so when you see him, right, is he hanging? Mr. Thomas says, yes. DOJ asks, and where was in comparison to this? Sorry, in comparison to this picture, whereabouts, what is head? Okay, that's not phrased very well, but you get the picture. Mr. Thomas replied, maybe a little bit below the circle. Maybe right about here, I guess. I don't know. I can't remember exactly, or maybe a little bit below the circle. The DOJ said, was his whole body on the floor? Was his butt on the floor? No. What part of his body was on the floor? I don't recall what was on the floor. I don't really think anything was on the floor. I don't really remember. So was his legs on the floor? Feet on the floor? Well, I'm going to say his feet was on the floor. You would assume, because it doesn't look that high. Yeah, because it doesn't have the, yeah. So you think his feet were on the floor. I really don't remember exactly, but I mean, I would assume his feet was on the floor. So when you saw now see, there's a knot on the noose right here. What part of the neck was the knot on? Like when you see it, did you try to loosen it or try to take it off? What part of the neck was that on? Do you recall at all? I really don't. I really don't. And when you pulled it, it looks like there was a portion left back on here. Mm-hmm. Was that attached to this? I don't. Like he said that was the portion that, like I said, when I remember ripping all that down, I don't know if I just slipped through or whatever the case may be. I just remember going like this and going to the ground, and then we started doing chest compressions. And he came off easily. Yeah, he came off easily. It didn't come off too hard. And you don't recall I don't recall taking the noose off. I really don't. I don't recall taking the thing from around his neck. Do you remember if the linen ripped so it separated from this, or if this is possibly the same thing as that? Do you recall when you ripped it? Do you remember if it like tore and broke and came into two separate pieces? I don't. So one thing that he has said is that there was a noose that was separately tied on to that piece of fabric. And apparently it came off of his neck pretty easily. So I wanted to highlight this because that really does show how unreliable he is when it comes to describing what he found. He doesn't remember how he was hanging. He just assumes he was. He doesn't know what happened other than that's where he found the body. And I believe, and I stand by, the fact that I think that he was sitting in the corner there. I do think that the rope was pulled tight, but I don't think that he was hanging there because there just isn't room for him to hang. If we look at the measurements of it all compared to the cinder blocks, he could not have been hanging. Now, the other part of that would be a problem, we're going to go back to the medical examiner's report, and I'll show you what the problem is there. So when he's talking about what happens to the body, it says basically after about a minute, they seize violently. This is what the medical examiner says. Now, I want you to think about this. If somebody is sitting with a straight metal thing poking in the back of their head, and they're starting to seize violently, what's going to happen? you're going to end up with cuts on the back of your head. There's going to be damage back there because you're going to be violently thrashing around, because his head would have, based on physics, he would have had to have been pressed up against the bed rail. The bed frame would have been pushing up against the back of his head. And if you're swinging violently, there would be some type of injury to his head. But as we see from the medical examiner's report, there are 0 injuries on his head. None. There is nothing back there. And based on what we've seen, based on that picture and based on the description, that's not possible. If he was not already dead when he was put in that position, he absolutely would have injured the back of his head as he was seizing from about the first minute. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of Jeffrey Epstein's final night in prison. One thing that seems abundantly clear is that the orange figure walking up those stairs was someone wearing orange. This was not somebody carrying linens up. We already knew that, but this proves it. There's also a multitude of inconsistencies in these sworn statements, and the way that Michael Thomas describes Jeffrey Epstein's body when he found it also seems like it's full of mistakes and confusion, and I'm not sure that he knows what he saw. He couldn't even say that Epstein's feet were touching the floor. And if his feet weren't touching the floor, it would be physically impossible in that space. It just doesn't even make sense. And so when we look at whether or not the people that have reported on this are reliable, it seems like much of the information they provided is not entirely reliable. But none of that is talked about in the reports. Therein lies the biggest issue with all of this. It's not as much the statements that were made as it is that the conclusions that were made were based on statements that clearly had problems. If you have any other thoughts about this, or if there's anything else you want to analyze, please let me know in the comments below. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it. And their top echelon,
Director General and the CEO,
this
both
is
resigned.
within one of our great allies. You know, they actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people.
Wait, what? So you're standing in front of cameras, and instead of talking about the economy, foreign policy, or the next election, the conversation opens with a question about suing the BBC. And the answer is basically, well, I guess I have to. That's how strange the political moment feels right now. Because this isn't just about one interview clip or one media dispute. It opens the door to something much bigger, a growing collision between media narratives, presidential power, the courts, and the boundaries of constitutional authority. And here's where things get interesting. The comment about the BBC centered on coverage of Donald Trump's January 6th speech, a speech he continues to